My husband slapped me, so I ended his career. Before we begin the story, make sure to subscribe to our channel and never miss more incredible stories every day. Grant slapped me with his left hand, then straightened the cuff of his blazer like he had spilled water. That was the detail I couldn't stop seeing, not the sound, although it cracked through our kitchen enough to make the hanging glasses tremble. Not even the sting spreading across my cheek. It was the way he adjusted his sleeve and glanced at the dark window over the sink, checking his reflection before he checked me. People talk about a moment changing everything like thunder splitting a tree. This was quieter. It was the instant I understood he wasn't surprised by what he'd done. He was calculating what it looked like. I stood there with my palm against my face, tasting blood where I'd bitten my cheek. The kitchen still smelled like garlic and lemon from the salmon I'd ruined while we fought. I had asked why he'd moved $600 from our joint account without saying anything. He had answered in that polished principal voice he used at donor breakfasts. Because every adult decision doesn't require your little audit, Leah. I should have walked away when he called my bookkeeping job cute. I should have left when he laughed because I asked why our mortgage auto pay had bounced, and he said, "You're so dramatic about numbers." Instead, I said the one sentence he couldn't control. Then maybe stop lying to me about where the money goes. His face didn't twist with rage. It went flat, deliberate. Then his hand came across. Afterward, he said my name once, softly, like I was the one who needed calming. Leah. I took 2 steps back. My legs felt hollow. He moved toward me, and I flinched so fast I hated myself for it. That made him stop. Something flashed in his eyes then, not guilt. Fear. Not of hurting me. Of what that flinch meant. Don't do that, he said. I barely touched you. The room went cold. He had already started rewriting it. I nodded because I knew that tone. The de-escalation tone. The one that came right before flowers and a version where my memory became the problem. I went upstairs, locked the bathroom door, and turned on the vanity lights. A red print was rising over my cheekbone. My hand shook so hard I almost dropped my phone. Then I opened the camera and took the first picture that would make leaving unavoidable. If you met Grant Morgan at St. Bellamy Academy, you would have loved him. Everyone did. He remembered janitors' names, shook parents' hands with both of his, and spoke in polished sentences that made announcements sound noble. At school auctions, women called him reassuring. Board members called him indispensable. At home, he had other words for me. Not ugly ones, not at first. The smarter kind. The kind you can mistake for feedback if you want the marriage to keep making sense. He called my clothes almost right. He said my job at the rehab clinic was good for someone who likes routine. When people asked what I did, he liked to answer for me. Leah keeps books for a physical therapy office, he would say, with a smile that made it sound like I alphabetized crayons. Sometimes he squeezed my knee under the table while he did it. The joke was always me. We had been married 9 years. Long enough for criticism to become weather. I mistook his certainty for safety. He chose restaurants, vacations, even paint colors with such confidence that my indecision felt childish next to him. Then that confidence turned directional. He didn't like when I drove at night. He didn't like Tasha because she was coarse. He didn't like me spending money without texting him first, even when it was my paycheck. He once made me return a blue coat I loved because it looked too eager. A joke about my spreadsheet brain. A hand on my lower back steering me out of conversations before I was done speaking. If I reacted, he sighed and asked why everything had to become a trial. A year earlier, at the winter gala, I watched him do something I filed away without understanding. A teacher named Elena Ruiz approached us near the silent auction table, pale and tight-lipped. "I emailed you twice," she told him. "About the incident report." Grant smiled without showing teeth. "Not tonight, Elena," she said. "A student got hurt." His fingers pressed into my back, hard enough to sting. "We will discuss this through the proper channel," he said. Then he turned to a donor and laughed. In the car, I asked what she meant. He called me dramatic for asking. That was the first memory that stopped looking harmless. The next morning, Grant sent me flowers before he came downstairs. White hydrangeas, the kind that looked good on a kitchen island and said nothing specific enough to hold against him later. The card read, "We were both upset. Let's reset tonight." No apology. No mention of his hand on my face. Just a shared weather pattern and a scheduled cleanup. I hadn't slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that tiny movement of his wrist after he hit me. I pressed a cold spoon to my cheek until the swelling went from bright to dull. Then I took more pictures in daylight from 3 angles, making sure the timestamp stayed visible. April 17th, 8:14 a.m. April 17th, 8:16 a.m. April 17th, 8:19 a.m. It felt ridiculous and clinical and, for the first time in months, sane. When he walked into the kitchen, he was dressed for school in navy slacks and a pale blue tie. He paused when he saw me and softened his face by degrees. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Not, I'm sorry I hit you. Not, I was wrong." I said, "My cheek hurts." He winced. "Leah, I hate that this got physical." This got physical. Like weather again. He came closer, carrying coffee in my favorite mug. I barely slept. "I've been sick over this." His eyes flicked to the bruise before returning to mine. "Can you cover that before tonight? The Olivers are hosting donors, and people notice everything." There it was. Not my pain. Optics. I asked, "Are you worried about me or the fundraiser photos?" His jaw tightened. Then he reached for my hand. "Please don't be cruel when I'm trying to make this right." By 10 o'clock, he had texted me 6 times from school. "Did you eat? Please answer. We need to be careful here." That last line sat on my screen like a pin. At 11:07, another message came in. Not from him. His iPad, the one he sometimes used at home, had synced to our family cloud years ago. A preview banner flashed while it charged on the den console where he'd left it overnight. "Elena Ruiz, I am not changing the report again. Stop asking." The message vanished before I could open it. When Grant called at lunch, his voice was honey. "We're okay," he said. I looked at the bruise, the flowers, and that disappearing notification and lied back. "Of course," I said, knowing I was done taking his version first. Tasha didn't ask me to prove anything. I texted her one picture at 12:02 p.m. No caption, just my face in the bathroom mirror, cheek bruised, eyes so flat I barely recognized myself. She called before the bubble stopped blinking. "Where is he?" "School. I'm leaving work. Pack a bag." That was Tasha. No ritual, no committee. We've known each other since community college, when we split gas money and bad coffee, and swore we'd never become women who explain men to each other like weather reports. Grant hated her because she saw through performance faster than anyone. He said she was abrasive. What he meant was unseduced. I filled an overnight bag in 12 minutes and still felt guilty about taking the good suitcase. That is what control does. It makes escape feel rude. I kept expecting him to pull into the driveway early and catch me like a teenager sneaking out. Instead, the house stayed eerily quiet, the cold scent of the expensive candle his assistant sent every Christmas. Tasha met me in the driveway in scrubs, hair still pinned up from work, and took one look at my face. "Oh, absolutely not," she said. I started crying so suddenly it embarrassed me. She put my bag in her back seat, guided me into the passenger side, and waited until the doors shut before she spoke again. "Did he hit you before?" I stared at my knees. "Not like that." Her hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Leah, that answer counts as yes." I wanted to say it wasn't simple. That he had grabbed my wrist once hard enough to leave fingerprints. That he had blocked a doorway. That he had thrown a glass into the sink beside me and later said I was dramatic for ducking. Instead I said, "I think this is the first time I can't explain it away." Tasha took me to a small hotel near the interstate instead of her apartment, because she knew Grant knew her address. She paid for 3 nights before I could argue. In the room, under the hum of a broken air conditioner, she made me photograph the bruise beside that day's newspaper and email the images to a new account. Then she looked me dead in the face and said, "What he did is abuse. What comes next is strategy." I thought the bruise was the worst thing I was carrying. Then Elena Ruiz called my phone at 8:41 that night. I almost didn't answer because I didn't recognize the number. "Mrs. Morgan?" A woman asked, voice tight. "This is Elena Ruiz. I got your number from the faculty retreat contact list. I'm sorry to call you." My stomach dropped. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed and looked at Tasha, who had gone still across from me. "It's okay," I said carefully. "What happened?" There was a pause long enough for me to hear footsteps in the hall. Then Elena said, "I got another message from your husband tonight telling me to revise a student incident statement and backdate it. He used his private account this time. I think he's panicking." My first stupid thought was that Grant was cheating. A secret affair hidden inside late-night texts. It would have been smaller. "Revise what?" I asked. An assault report from February. A donor's son shoved a scholarship kid into a trophy case after practice. Ava Lynn needed 6 stitches. I wrote what I saw. Grant had me change the wording once, so it sounded like horseplay. Tonight, he wants the time adjusted and a line added saying there were no prior complaints against the boy. Tasha mouthed, "What?" I put Elena on speaker. She exhaled shakily. "I don't know who else to trust. The school's HR email bounced my complaint last month. Then my evaluation changed from exemplary to inconsistent. Yesterday, Grant told me, smiling, that St. Bellamy needed faculty who understood discretion." Something inside me clicked into place. Her pale face. The incident report. His hand in my back. The same polished tone he used after slapping me. "Why call me?" I asked. "Because I think he uses your cloud account on the home iPad," she said. He accidentally replied, all to a thread in March. "Your email handle appeared in the device signature for a second before he fixed it. I figured if he was hiding this at home too, maybe." She stopped. After we hung up, I restored recently deleted messages from the sync device. 6 minutes later, a chain appeared that he thought was gone. Emails to himself from a burner address, drafts to the CFO, and one line sent at 11:03 that morning. Delete footage request. Ruiz is becoming emotional. That wasn't one bad decision. It was the first glimpse of a machine. The next 2 days turned my marriage into a spreadsheet. That sounds cold, but numbers were the only thing that had stopped lying to me. I built a timeline on my laptop. February 9th, 7:42 p.m. Ava Lynn injured in the gym corridor. February 10th, 6:18 a.m. From the restored thread, Grant emailed the operations manager. Pull West Hall footage before parent pickup. February 14th, Elena's original report filed. February 16th, edited version submitted. March 3rd, Elena's performance review changed. March 5th, Grant told me over takeout that teachers were becoming fragile. Once I lined his sentences up beside his records, a pattern emerged, and it made me sick. Every time he came home unusually tender, there had been a problem at school. Every time he accused me of being suspicious, there was something worth hiding. Elena met me in the back booth of a coffee shop outside town because she was afraid someone from St. Bellamy would see us. She looked younger than I remembered, with bitten nails and a posture made of apology. "I kept telling myself maybe I misunderstood him," she said. "He never says, 'Help me cover this up.' He says, 'Let's protect the institution,' or 'Be careful about language that creates liability.'" "What happened after the injury?" I asked. She wrapped both hands around her cup. "There were prior complaints against that boy, too. One from a freshman whose parents don't donate enough to matter, and one from a groundskeeper's nephew at summer camp. Grant told me those reports were unsubstantiated. Then he had IT reduce camera retention from 90 days to 30 in that hallway. After Ava got hurt, he wanted the new report to make it sound spontaneous." "Did he threaten you?" She laughed once, without humor. "He told me my contract renewal depended on whether I understood the culture here." That afternoon, I checked our joint statements and found 3 reimbursements Grant had called school hospitality. February 12th, for $1,850. March 7th, $6,200. April 3rd, $7,600. Each went to Ashwell Risk Consulting, which had a mailbox address and no website. One memo line read parent stabilization. When I texted Grant asking where he was that evening, he replied in 10 seconds. "Late dinner. Don't spiral." He was at home alone when I checked the driveway camera. By Saturday, I knew 2 things for certain. Grant had buried the truth about Ava Lynn's injury, and Ashwell Risk Consulting was not consulting anyone. Tasha drove me there because she no longer trusted me alone with my own adrenaline. The glass door had sun-faded letters and a handwritten sign that said mail transferred. I took photos anyway. Back at the hotel, I searched public records until my eyes burned. Ashwell had been formed 11 months earlier by an LLC service in Wilmington. The listed officer was a former public relations contractor named Shane Alder, specializing in reputational response for educational institutions. In normal language, bury bad stories before donors hear them. I found him because Grant had once bragged he knew a guy who could calm parents down before they become plaintiffs. Now it looked like a payment trail. Elena forwarded me 3 screenshots from her work email before disabling sync on her school phone. In them, Grant instructed her to remove speculative references to prior aggression and avoid wording that creates a discoverable pattern. He wasn't protecting a child. He was protecting a paying family. Then Elena sent one more file. A scanned memo from March 11th documenting a complaint by another teacher, Ms. Warren, that Grant had pressured her to pass the same donor's son in algebra despite missing work and repeated disciplinary issues. At the bottom, in handwriting, someone had written, "Discuss verbally only. No further electronic trail." I kept rereading that line because it sounded exactly like our marriage. No marks. No trail. Nothing anyone else could hold. When Nina Patel, a family attorney Tasha's cousin recommended, reviewed my folder that evening, she tapped the bruise photos first, then the financial records, then the emails. "This is two cases braided together," she said. "Domestic abuse and institutional misconduct. Do not mix them emotionally. Connect them factually." I asked, "Is this enough?" She didn't soften it. "It's enough to scare him. It may be enough to open doors. But if you want the board to act, you need someone inside willing to put their name on the pattern." At 9:06 p.m., my phone buzzed with an unknown number. It was Ava Lynn's mother, and she was crying. Grant realized I was no longer orbiting him before I said a single brave thing. He started texting softly. "Good morning, beautiful. I miss you. Tell me where you are so I know you're safe." Then the messages sharpened. "We need to be careful what story gets created here. You are upset, and people may misunderstand. I have protected you before, Leah. Don't make me regret that." That last line sat in my body like a splinter. On Monday morning, St. Bellamy posted photos from a spring literacy breakfast. Grant stood at a podium in a charcoal suit, beside third graders with paperbacks. The caption praised his leadership and commitment to student well-being. Parents replied with steady, moral, exceptional. I stared at his face until it blurred. An hour later, he called from an unknown number. I let it ring twice, then answered. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, voice low and even. "Doing what?" "Running around town with Tasha, speaking to staff, accessing private devices. This isn't healthy." My skin went cold. He knew enough to be dangerous, not enough to know exactly what I had. "You slapped me," I said. A long silence. Then, maddeningly calm, "I touched your face during an argument. You know that matters." There it was again. Revision as weapon. He kept going. "You are exhausted. If you start making allegations against a school, against me, people will ask hard questions about your judgment. I don't want that." For one wild second, I understood how women get folded back into abusive marriages by tone alone. He sounded so composed, like I was a beloved but unstable person drifting toward disaster, and he was nobly trying to stop it. Then he said, "Come home tonight. We can keep this private." Private. The holiest word in our marriage. Private meant invisible. Private meant deniable. Private meant his version. That afternoon, Elena texted me a photo from the faculty lounge bulletin board. Her name had been removed from next year's honors retreat chaperone list. Beneath it, someone had written in blue pen, "Maybe less drama this cycle." At 4:20 p.m., Grant emailed the parent community about transparency, compassion, and St. Bellamy's culture of trust. By 4:27, he sent me a separate message. "If you force this, no one is going to see you clearly again." Once I stopped hoping for a misunderstanding, the work became simple. I made folders. Home. School. Overlap. Nina said names matter because panic makes your brain slippery. Facts need shelves. So I shelved everything. The bruise photos from April 17th. The hotel receipt from April 17th through April 20th. Screenshots of Grant's texts saying we need to be careful here, and I touched your face during an argument. A voicemail that began, "I am sorry you felt frightened," and ended, "Think hard before you damage institutions that cannot defend themselves in public." Elena's screenshots. Ava Lynn's mother's written account of receiving a call from Grant before she ever saw the hallway footage request. A payroll export Elena sent me showing that Ms. Warren's coaching stipend vanished 2 weeks after her complaint. Grant's reimbursement trail to Ashwell Risk Consulting. For $1,850 on February 12th, $6,200 on March 7th, $7,600 on April 3rd, all approved as emergency parent relations. Nina found the most useful detail. The same bank ending in 4421 had also received a personal transfer from our joint account for $600 the night Grant hit me. The money I'd asked about wasn't random. He had been moving household cash to the same fixer he used at school. In the overlap folder, I built a table with 4 columns. Date, what happened at home, what happened at school, supporting file. February 16th. Grant came home with wine and tenderness after Elena changed the report. March 3rd. He accused me of interrogating him about late nights. Elena's evaluation dropped the same morning. April 17th. He hit me after I asked about the missing $600. At 11:03 a.m., he emailed delete footage request. Ruiz is becoming emotional. Looking at it laid out that way stripped him of mystery. He wasn't a complicated man with pressure issues. He was consistent. He punished risk. He rewarded silence. He changed language before he changed behavior. That night, Nina said, "You need one more piece from inside the school. Something the board cannot dismiss as marital spillover." At 7:53 p.m., Elena forwarded a PDF called Board Packet Draft. Page 14 had a line item for student wellness outreach. Approved amount, $18,650. The attached invoice was from Ashwell. Someone had billed hush money as pastoral care. I found out Grant had moved from defense to offense because Mr. Bennett called me by accident. At 9:12 Tuesday morning, my phone rang from a St. Bellamy board line Elena had slipped me. When I answered, an older man's voice said, "Grant, before this gets any messier, I need to know whether your wife actually accessed school financials from your residence." I said, "This is Leah Morgan." Silence. Paper shifting. A breath. "I see," he said at last. "Then perhaps this conversation should have happened sooner." Mr. Bennett was the board treasurer, formal as oak. He told me Grant had requested an emergency executive session because he was facing a domestic instability issue and believed confidential school materials had been compromised by his estranged spouse. According to Grant, I was emotionally unwell, financially erratic, and retaliating because he had recently encouraged me to seek treatment. That wasn't the worst part. The worst part was checking our joint account while Bennett spoke and seeing the balance at $183.44. Grant had emptied nearly everything overnight. Savings, vacation reserve, the tax envelope. More than $22,000 gone, transferred into an account ending in 9088 that I didn't recognize. When I texted him, my hands were so cold they barely worked. "Where's our money?" His reply came 30 seconds later. "Protecting assets from impulsive behavior is not theft." I read it 3 times. Then out loud for Tasha, who swore hard enough to make the hotel manager glance over. Nina didn't swear. She just said, "Good. He's pushing." It didn't feel good. It felt like being flayed by someone who knew exactly where I was tender. I had once told Grant my deepest fear was not being hurt. It was being made unbelievable. Now he was weaponizing that confession with letterhead. By noon, he had emailed 2 mutual friends asking them to check in on me because I was having a difficult mental health episode. One sent me the message with a question mark. The other left me on read. I cried in the bathroom for 7 minutes, washed my face, and came back out harder. "Okay," I told Nina. "No more quiet exit." At 2:14 p.m., she filed the preservation letter. At 2:17, Grant called 14 times in a row. By Tuesday night, I had 2 futures sitting open on Nina's conference table. One was smaller. File for emergency financial relief. Change passwords. Get the bruise photos into a record and disappear from Grant's reach before he could tighten the story any further. That future was not cowardly. Nina kept saying that. Survival never is. But it would leave St. Bellamy to clean itself with the same hands that dirted it. The second future was larger and less merciful. Send a formal misconduct packet to the board treasurer, copied to outside counsel, requesting preservation of footage, reimbursement records, HR complaints, and email deletions. Name the pattern plainly. Force them to decide whether they were protecting children or protecting a man who knew how to sound decent. I hated that I had to be brave on behalf of strangers while still shaking. Tasha sat across from me eating pretzels. "He's betting you choose peace," she said. "Men like Grant always call their immunity peace." Nina slid a legal pad toward me. "Write down what you want, not what you want to avoid." So I wrote, "I want him unable to rewrite me. I want Elena protected. I want that mother to know she wasn't crazy. I want the next woman he corners to meet a locked door." When I finished, my hand hurt. Mr. Bennett called just after 8. He sounded cautious, but not closed. "If materials exist," he said, "send them to me directly. Do not send them through school channels." And if there are allegations involving student safety, I need dates, names, and document origin. He still didn't believe me fully. I could hear it. But skepticism is not the same thing as refusal. Nina and I spent 3 hours building a packet that read like a timeline, not a plea. Cover memo. Table of contents. Section A. Photographic evidence of domestic assault, dated April 17th. Section B. Threatening communications. Section C. Altered student injury report and witness statement from Elena Ruiz. Section D. Reimbursements to Ashwell Risk Consulting totaling $18,650. Section E. Overlapping dates and retaliatory actions against faculty. Everything sourced. At 11:48 p.m., I signed the complaint with a hand steadier than I felt. At 11:53, Grant texted the question that told me he was cornered. The board meeting happened Thursday at 3 p.m. in a conference room that smelled like lemon polish and money. The administrative wing looked exactly the way Grant liked his life to look. Framed mission statements, muted art, carpet thick enough to quiet bad news. Nina walked beside me carrying 2 binders in a gray suit. Elena arrived separately, pale but steady. Mr. Bennett met us at the door with counsel. Grant was already inside. He stood when I entered, not because he respected me, but because an audience was present. Navy suit. Silver watch. Sorrow. Leah, he said softly, as if we were both victims of a misunderstanding. Mr. Bennett cut him off. Sit down, please. The procedure was colder than I expected, which helped. Counsel began by stating that the meeting concerned allegations of retaliation, records tampering, improper expenditures, and conduct exposing the school to liability. Years of fear translated into agenda language. Nina presented first. No speeches, just chronology. April 17th injury photos, timestamped. Grant's texts. The restored email chain instructing staff to revise a student report and delete footage requests. Then the financials. 3 payments to Ashwell Risk Consulting. Invoice descriptions inconsistent with board-approved use categories, plus the household transfer to the same account ending in 4421. Grant leaned back and folded his hands. My wife is conflating marital conflict with school operations, he said. This is deeply unfortunate. Elena spoke next, voice shaking only on her first sentence. She described the February hallway incident, the edits to her report, the reduced camera retention, the changed evaluation, the threat to her contract renewal. Ava Lynn's mother read a statement over speakerphone. Grant called before medical bills were submitted and urged her to keep this proportionate for the sake of Ava's future at the academy. Grant smiled sadly. Context matters, he said. Leah has been emotionally volatile for some time. Ms. Ruiz is a probationary teacher under review. I hope the board sees the danger of assembling grievances into a narrative. He was still winning the room by tone. Then Mr. Bennett opened the final folder Nina had saved for last. Inside was the recording Grant never imagined I had. The recording came from a place so ordinary it almost embarrassed me. Grant had called me through the driveway camera app the Sunday before all this exploded because he couldn't find his house keys. The app archived audio by default. When Nina asked whether any shared devices stored calls, I checked the log and found a second file from February 10th, marked Saved by User. Grant had used the same app that morning to buzz in a facilities manager while I was at work. He must have forgotten the audio stayed attached. Mr. Bennett pressed play. First there was static, a car door, footsteps. Then Grant's voice, sharp and unguarded in a way I had almost never heard in public. I don't care what Ruiz wrote originally. Fix the report before Lynn's mother starts collecting opinions. And call Alder. If parents think there is a pattern, this becomes expensive. A male voice said, "What about the hallway clip?" Grant answered, "Lower retention and tell IT the camera is being audited. If Ruiz won't cooperate, document her as unstable. She cries. Use that." No one in the room moved. The recording kept going. "And the kid?" the man asked. "The kid's father is on the capital campaign committee," Grant said. "Do not make me explain donor math to adults." Mr. Bennett stopped the audio. He didn't need the rest. Grant's whole body changed. The sorrow evaporated first. What was left was the flat face I knew from home, the one that appeared whenever he got tired of pretending. "This is illegally obtained," he snapped. Nina didn't blink. "It is archived from a jointly owned residential security application." Grant turned to me then, as if the board had vanished and we were suddenly back in our kitchen. You did this because I hit you. The room inhaled. He realized what he had said at the same instant everyone else did. Mr. Bennett's counsel put down her pen very carefully. Elena covered her mouth. I felt the air leave my lungs in one clean rush. Grant tried to recover. I mean, after our argument, after she interpreted. Stop talking, Mr. Bennett said. Then outside counsel asked whether he had paid to conceal student harm. Grant did not answer the question. He tried 3 other things first. He asked for a break. He demanded counsel of his own. He said the board was overreacting to a coordinated emotional event. None of it worked. Once the recording played and his slip about hitting me landed, the architecture of his charm stopped holding weight. At 5:11, Mr. Bennett announced that Grant was being placed on leave pending a full external investigation. By 5:24, his access to St. Bellamy systems was suspended. By 6:02, outside counsel requested copies of all reimbursement approvals, complaint files, evaluation changes, and camera retention directives from the previous 18 months. It almost looked easy. It wasn't. It was what happens when institutions decide their risk has changed sides. Grant left through a side corridor, jaw clenched hard. He didn't look at me. That hurt more than I expected. Not because I wanted kindness. Because after 9 years, it was grotesque how quickly he could switch from controlling me to deleting me. Rumors spread through parent texts. Some people believed me immediately. Others blamed me with breathtaking efficiency. I got a message from one mother saying, "I hope you're proud of yourself for damaging a school over a marital dispute." Another wrote, "He cornered me once after a fundraiser, and I always told myself I imagined it." Elena was put on paid leave for 2 days for her protection, then reinstated with counsel present. Ava Lynn's parents hired an attorney. Ms. Warren submitted her own statement. The local paper requested comment after someone leaked the leave notice. St. Bellamy issued a 1-paragraph statement about leadership transition and student safety review. Grant resigned before they could terminate him publicly, but the board minutes still reflected the investigation. In our city, that mattered. There was collateral damage. Staff panicked. Parents threatened withdrawals. I lost 2 mutual friends and the illusion that truth earns applause. But by Friday afternoon, the first emergency court order froze the missing marital funds and required no direct contact except through counsel. For the first time in a week, Grant had no private doorway back to me. And then his mother called, begging me to make it stop. 3 months later, I live in an apartment above a florist shop where the mornings smell like eucalyptus. It is not the life I thought I was building at 36. My dishes don't match. The radiator hisses. I can hear my upstairs neighbor sneeze. And still, when I unlock my own door at night and nobody asks who I texted, what I spent, why I was late, the silence feels expensive in the best possible way. Healing turned out to be boring in places I didn't expect. Forms. Password resets. Therapy every Wednesday at 6 p.m. A legal pad where I write down facts when my memory starts sanding the edges off what happened. Nina finalized the order and the divorce petition. Tasha helped me move in a violent afternoon fueled by iced coffee and hatred. Elena stayed at St. Bellamy after the investigation widened. 2 more staff members came forward, and the board hired an outside firm to review reporting practices. Mr. Bennett sent a brief email that said only, "You were right to document everything." I cried harder over that than I did over the flowers Grant sent after he hit me. Grant is no longer principal anywhere. The local article about his resignation was careful, but careful is enough here. People know. He still has supporters. Men like him usually do. Some call him misunderstood. Some call me vindictive. Those opinions used to feel like knives. Now they feel like weather. The part no one tells you about leaving is that grief and relief can live in the same body without canceling each other out. I grieve the version of my marriage I defended for years. I grieve the woman who thought endurance was maturity. I even grieved him, or the person I kept trying to assemble from his better fragments. But grief is not regret. I do not regret the bruised photo. I do not regret the complaint. I do not regret being the witness he could not manage. Last week, I bought myself a blue coat. Not a practical one. Not a neutral one. A blue Grant once said made me look too eager. I wore it to therapy, then walked home with a cheap bouquet under my arm. And for the first time in a long time, I caught my reflection in a storefront window and didn't look away.